Hare Krishna, and welcome to the fifth class of the Krishna book. We're going to start from chapter 12, which is a little cluster of Leela. 12 and 13 and 14 really go together. We'll see if we can get through those all in one sitting. And on this 2 days before Gaura Purnima. And we'll start with some kirtan.
Radiomi. Happy birthday week to Mahaprabhu. Haribol. And Tuesday night we have our special TNT lock to honor, or Thursday night to honor Mahaprabhu. So come into your comfortable seat. Maybe take a few moments, a few breaths to invite any movement in. Open and close your mouth, release your jaw. Take a deep breath in through your nose, filling up. Exhale, clear it out. All right, take 2 more clearing breaths on your own, an opportunity to just shift from your day to this sacred time together, studying Shastra, receiving the transcendental wisdom from the Krishna book and Sangha. We'll start with our opening prayers, this invocation, this honoring of all of our teachers, giving us this torchlight of knowledge, removing the darkness of ignorance. Take a deep breath in, fill up.
Hare
Om Jnanatimirantasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. How are we doing on air? Enough air, too much air? What do you think? Good, perfect, great.
Are you okay?
Yeah. All right. Oh, great turnout. I think we had a dozen devotees. Love to see that. All right. And in honor of that, we're going to start chapter 12. So, but before we do, last week we read chapters 9 through 11, which means we heard about Mother Yashoda binding Krishna, which was pretty all right. And Krishna, as a bonus at the end of that chapter, he knocked down the Yamala Arjuna trees, and we heard their backstory, how there was two demigods, Nalakura and Manigriva, that were victims, beneficiaries of a cursed blessing from Narada Muni, and how they had to live in that tree, but they got to see Krishna. And it was what they needed to get free from their own attachment to comfortable heavenly situation, and their prayers to Krishna. And then we heard about Krishna killing a calf demon and the Bakasura demon. And I think we also heard about a fruit vendor who gave some things to Krishna, and how when you give anything to Krishna, you don't lose, you gain. So any reflections from any of that to start us off? Now, a few devotees pointed out how there's this dynamic of when you give to Krishna, you gain. I pointed that out in the WhatsApp, which, yeah.
And the gifts, that was pointed out. That Krishna's giving us gifts
He's giving us gifts.
all along.
Yeah.
Whether we see them or not, whether we see them as gifts or not. It's a beautiful reflection.
Any other reflections from our readings or discussion? The binding of Krishna, yeah.
I love how we spoke about how remembrance is also a form of service. Remembering Krishna, whether it's remembering these pastimes that we're reading, or part of the Leela that you find cute or inspiring or silly or painful, whatever it may be, but that remembering Krishna and remembering these pastimes is also service.
Yeah, it seems really simple, right? Remembrance, because you're giving your mind to Krishna. You could be remembering and thinking of anything. It's like choosing to actively. And then if you're really lucky, then he just shows up spontaneously. You're like, oh yeah, remember that pastime? That was great. Yeah.
And even if you're feeling that, like, hey, I want to do more service, or I don't have time, my schedule isn't allowing, or I have other responsibilities, or whatever it may be, that taking the time to be on this in the class or thinking about it when you're driving the car, it's like that's also giving service.
Yeah. To somehow or other remember Krishna and never forget him. These are the two essences. And of, there it is. Always remember Krishna, never forget him. And every other rule or regulation in all the Shastra is just a servant to these two things. And yeah, that's really practical, because if you feel like you want to do more than you can do, with your body or your time, and it's like, I can't adjust that, but you can always think of Krishna. You can try to think of him when you're doing what you're doing, and dedicate what you're doing to him, and bring remembrance, a reconnection. And that's actually like a really important and powerful service. So,
yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking a lot about mercy. I don't know where that came, and all the lessons, and that I guess he could have killed those two boys, but he just turned them into trees. And then there was the one demon who nursed from him, and I thought it said at the end, and even though she left her body, he liberated her. So I was thinking about all the mercy, and just thinking like how I show up in the world, or being like a grudge holder, or having anger, and like how you get to have all that, like, mercy towards me. I know it's Krishna, so obviously kind of answers, but just to that quality of having so much mercy towards others, even when you've been so wronged.
Yeah, that's why when Uddhava was remembering that pastime with Putana, the assassin, she wasn't even an honest assassin. It's one thing to be like, yeah, I kill babies. It's another thing, she wasn't even honest about it. She pretended she wasn't that. She showed up like she's a lying assassin, baby killer. And Krishna still gave her a position as a nurse or a mother in the spiritual world. And so Uddhava's reaction to that is, how could I find anybody more merciful than that? Because there isn't, because it's so over the top. And I believe Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to that verse, where Uddhava prays that way, that this kind of disproportionate relationship between what Krishna gives and what she was offering is the standard of his character. That's, in other words, that's just the kind of person he is, which is really heart melting. It's like very touching.
So
Thank you.
want to strive to have those qualities
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah, I mean, and according to the nectar of devotion, it's the practice of bhakti that gets us in touch with Krishna that allows us to actually also take on that quality. I mean, how can one be compassionate unless they have something to give? Krishna has everything to give. He has actually everything to give, and he chooses to. So in order for like a tiny, tiny infinitesimal living entity to actually get real compassion is an empowered situation. So you can only give what you've gotten yourself, right? Like if you want to say you're like your car is stalled and you want to push the car. This is back in the old days, kids. When you had to push a car, put it in neutral, you can only push it as fast as you're going. That's just physics. So you can only give if you have something to give. So really bhakti is like the process or experience of receiving Krishna and then sharing the overflow. That's what makes it possible to have compassion. It's a very high thing to have real compassion, to like see somebody be like, boy, they really need help and I'm going to give it to them. Not because they deserve it or they've done anything to earn it, but just because I can and Krishna wants it and it's the right thing to do. Yeah, thank you. Which is really to the point of Lord Chaitanya's appearance in a couple of days, because that's his whole mood. It's described in the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila that the associates of Lord Chaitanya, they would give indiscriminately, not considering whether somebody was fit or unfit for mercy. They just gave. It's described, they plundered the storehouse of love of God. They plundered it. And when they emptied it, it refilled itself magically. Bhakti being of that nature. So the Sanskrit word for that is audarya, overflowing mercy. Krishna's pastimes are called the Madhurya Lila, the overflowing sweetness, and Lord Chaitanya's mercy pastimes are called Audarya Lila, overflowing mercy. Stacy.
I didn't just read these.
How are you joining?
Huh?
Welcome, by the way.
Oh,
Sir.
thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. One of the things that I found actually in the last 2 years that I've been really working on are holding resentments and things that and really just trying to always be in the mood of love, the mood of Krishna, right? And having mercy and having love and giving that to people and even if they maybe have harmed me or if they weren't kind to me or something, and if they weren't like, hey, let me take you in, come join us, if they sort of left me out and I was sort of on the side, I find that when I'm in a position of like, I could, oh, why are they not? When I just let it go and I really just show mercy and love and I just lead with the mood of love, lead with the mood of Krishna, it's like times 100 how I feel. When I want to sort of say something that's not nice or take offense, which I know is a big one for me, when I want to do that and I don't, I find that my house empties and it keeps filling up again. Like you just said, it keeps filling up and it keeps filling up and it keeps filling up. And that to me is something like it took so long for me to kind of get that.
Yeah.
So learning that and knowing that makes me want to continue to be like that.
Thank
That
you.
makes sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Material consciousness is consciousness of a world of limited resources, where we're afraid of losing and we're afraid of giving. And it's, what have you done for me lately? And if I give to you, then I don't have enough for me. And that's material mathematics, you know? And the spiritual mathematics is 1 + 1 is 1. 1 - 1 is 1. There's no loss. You get to just keep giving. And so the Bhakti movement of Lord Chaitanya, the Sankirtan movement, is a movement that teaches us repeatedly by experience, theoretically and practically. We get to experience that we can give and not lose, but we gain. Like the fruit vendor, she's like, this is a cute little guy. He came with he dropped all the grains to barter with. He had this tiny little baby hands. She's like, whatever, I don't care. It's just whatever you want. Here's some pomegranates, here's some mangoes. You're just such a nice little boy. And he reciprocated with her unlimitedly. So, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Caitlin had a reflection.
Caitlin.
I can make it short and sweet. I really enjoyed when Krishna and Balaram are playing with their friends and how Rahini goes to get them and they're like, nah, I'm good. I'm having too much fun. And then she goes and gets Mother Yashoda and then
Calls in the big guns.
yeah. And then just for like, I really loved like the Balarama and Krishna were so engrossed in playing with their friends that they did not wish to go back. They just engaged themselves in playing more and more. And like, that's something that I'm like, oh, like how would it be to like just play with Krishna more and more? Like to be such engrossed with that and, you know, thinking about how Krishna wanted to play, like this sort of thing too, that like, a little further down, when his playmate then threatened to not allow him to play with them again, Krishna became afraid. And I'm like, oh, Krishna gets afraid? What? Like, it's so, not heartwarming, but it's like, oh, it's a little bit of a relief to be like, oh, even the supreme Godhead himself was afraid at some point.
He's afraid of Mother Yashoda too. When she's chasing him.
Right. And so to have that in this context of the supreme being and to be like, oh, well, my experience of fear is not singular. So it's so refreshing to be able to see this whole engrossment of him wanting to connect and also understanding, you know, there's fear in the heart of God.
Yeah, and it's also, Vishwanath explains, it's a spiritual emotion. It's not like our fear is a manifestation of tamas, and it serves a purpose, but it's basically the material energy, and Krishna's not actually experiencing being in the material energy here. Like his friends basically like peer pressure him, you know, but that's coming from pure love of God. It's actually in the spiritual energy. His mother is chasing him with a stick, not to hit him, but to put the fear of God in him, because she's like, he is such a rascal. If I don't train him properly, he's going to grow up to like steal and like lie, and that's love for him. And so he's afraid. His fear of her is also in the spiritual energy. So it's like the pure essence of that emotion as part of a loving relationship. You know, it's not like the fear we have, you know, watching a horror movie or experiencing some scary thing in life. It's relatable, but it's also elevating.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, chapter 12. The killing of the Aghasura demon. Once the Lord desired to go early in the morning with all his cowherd boyfriends to the forest, where they were to assemble together and take lunch. As soon as he got up from bed, he blew his buffalo horn bugle and called all his friends together. Keeping the calves before them, they started for the forest in a great procession. In this way, Lord Krishna assembled thousands of his boyfriends. They were each equipped with a stick, flute, and horn, as well as a lunch bag, and each of them was taking care of thousands of calves. All the boys appeared very jolly and happy in that excursion. As a note, so Krishna and all the boys have sticks, they have flute to play with, they have a horn to call the cows. And Krishna's horn has a name, Mandrakosha, which I have a godbrother called Mandrakosha, so I know this. It means rolling thunder. Rolling thunder. Each and every one of them, including Krishna, was attentive to his personal calves as he herded them in the different parts in the forest. The boys were fully decorated with various kinds of gold and ornaments, yet out of sporting propensities they began to pick up flowers, leaves, twigs, peacock feathers, and red clay from different places in the forest and further decorate themselves in different ways. While passing through the forest, one boy stole another boy's lunch package and passed it to a third. And when the boy whose lunch package was stolen came to know of it, he tried to take it back. But the boy who had it threw it to another boy. This sportive playing went on amongst the boys as childhood pastimes. When Lord Krishna went ahead to a distant place in order to see some specific scenery, the boys behind him ran to try and catch up to be the first to touch him. So there was a great competition. One would say, "I will go there and touch Krishna," and another would say, "Oh, you cannot go, I'll touch Krishna first." Some of them played on their flutes or vibrated bugles made of buffalo horn. Some of them gladly followed the peacocks and imitated the sounds of the cuckoo. While the birds were flying in the sky, the boys ran after the birds as shadows along the ground and tried to follow their exact courses. Some of them went to the monkeys and silently sat down by them, and some of them imitated the dancing of the peacocks. Some of them caught monkeys by the tail and played with them, and when the monkeys jumped into a tree, the boys followed. When a monkey showed its face and teeth, a boy imitated and showed his teeth to the monkey. Some of the boys played with the frogs on the bank of the Yamuna, and when, out of fear, the frogs jumped into the water, the boys immediately dove in after them. And when the boys came out of the water and saw their own shadows, they would stand imitating, making caricatures and laughing. They would also go to an empty well and make loud sounds. And when the echo came back, they would call it ill names and laugh. As stated personally by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita, he is realized proportionally by transcendentalists as Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here, in confirmation of the same statement, Lord Krishna, who awards the impersonalist the pleasure of Brahman realization by his bodily effulgence, also gives pleasure to the devotees as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are under the spell of the external energy Maya take him only as a beautiful child, yet he gave full transcendental pleasure to the cowherd boys who played with him. Only after accumulating heaps of pious activities were those boys promoted to personally associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Who can estimate the transcendental fortune of the residents of Vrindavan? They were personally seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He, whom many yogis cannot even find after undergoing severe austerities, although he is sitting within their hearts. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. One may search for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the pages of the Vedas and Upanishads, but it is difficult to find him there. However, one who is fortunate enough to associate with the devotee can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. After accumulating pious activities in many, many previous lives, the cowherd boys were seeing Krishna face to face and playing with him as friends. They could not understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they were playing as intimate friends with intense love for him. When Lord Krishna was enjoying his childhood pastimes with his boyfriends, one Aghasura demon became very impatient. He was unable to tolerate seeing Krishna play so happily, and therefore he appeared before the boys intending to kill them all. Although the denizens of heaven drank nectar daily to prolong their lives, they were afraid of this Aghasura and were wondering, when will this demon be killed? The denizens used to drink nectar to become immortal, but actually they were not confident of their immortality. On the other hand, the boys who were playing with Krishna had no fear of the demons. They were free of fear. Any material arrangement for protecting oneself from death is always unsure, but if one is in Krishna consciousness, then immortality is confidently assured. The demon Aghasura appeared before Krishna and his friends. Aghasura happened to be the younger brother of Putana and Bakasura, and he thought, Krishna has killed my brother and sister, now I shall kill him, along with all his friends and calves. Aghasura was instigated by Kamsa, so he had come with determination. Aghasura also thought that when he would offer grains and water in memory of his brother and sister and kill Krishna and all the cowherd boys, then automatically all the inhabitants of Vrindavan would die. Generally for the householders, the children are the life and breath force. When all the children die, then naturally the parents also die on account of strong affection for them. Aghasura thus deciding to kill all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, expanded himself by the yogic siddhi called Mahima. The demons are generally expert in achieving almost all kinds of mystic powers. In the yoga system, by the perfection called Mahima Siddhi, one can expand himself as he desires. The demon Akasura expanded himself up to 8 miles and assumed the shape of a very fat serpent. Having attained this wonderful body, he stretched his mouth open just like a mountain cave. Desiring to swallow all the boys at once, including Krishna and Balaram, he sat on the path. The demon, in the shape of a big fat serpent, expanded his lips from land to sky. His lower lip was touching the ground and his upper lip was touching the clouds. His jaws appeared like a big mountain cave without limitation, and his teeth appeared just like mountain summits. His tongue appeared to be a broad traffic way, and he was breathing just like a hurricane. His eyes were blazing like fire. At first, the boys thought the demon was a statue, but after examining it, they saw that it was a big serpent lying down on the road and widening his mouth. They began to talk among themselves. Dear friends, this figure appears to be a great animal, and he is sitting in such a posture just to swallow us all. Just see, is it not a big snake that has widened his mouth to eat all of us? One of them said, yes, what you say is true. This animal's upper lip appears to be just like the sunshine, and its lower lip is just like the reflection of red sunshine on the ground. Its mouth appears to be like a big mountain cave, and its height cannot be estimated. That long highway appears to be its tongue, and inside the mouth it is as dark as the mountain cave. The hot wind that is blowing like a hurricane is his breathing, and the fishy, bad smell coming out from his mouth is the smell of his intestines. Then they further consulted among themselves. If we all at one time entered into the mouth of this great serpent, how could it possibly swallow all of us? And even if it were to swallow all of us at once, it could not swallow Krishna. Krishna will immediately kill it, as he did Bakasura. Talking in this way, all the boys looked at the beautiful lotus-like face of Krishna, and they began to clap and smile, and so they marched forward and entered the mouth of the gigantic serpent. Meanwhile, Krishna, who was the super soul within everyone's heart, could understand that the big statuesque figure was a demon. The boys did not know this, however, and thus, while Krishna was planning how to stop the destruction of his intimate friends, all the boys, along with their calves, entered the mouth of the serpent. But Krishna did not enter. The demon was awaiting Krishna's entrance, and he was thinking, everyone has entered except Krishna, who has killed my brother and sister. Krishna is the assurance of safety to everyone, but when he saw that his friends were already out of his hands and were lying within the belly of a great serpent, he became momentarily aggrieved. He was also struck with wonder at how the external energy works so wonderfully. He began to consider how he could kill the demon and at the same time save the boys and calves. Finally, after some deliberation, he also entered the mouth of the demon. When Krishna entered, all the demigods who had gathered to see the fun and who were hiding within the clouds expressed their feelings with the words, "Alas, alas!" At the same time, all the friends of Akasura, especially Kamsa, who were all accustomed to eating flesh and blood, expressed their jubilation, understanding that Krishna had also entered the mouth of the demon. While the demon was trying to smash Krishna and his companions, Krishna heard the demigods crying, "Alas, alas!" And he immediately began to expand himself within the throat of the demon. Although he had a gigantic body, the demon choked by the expanding of Krishna. His big eyes moved violently and he quickly suffocated. His life air could not come out from any source, and ultimately it burst out of a hole in the upper part of his skull. Thus his life air passed out. After the demon was dead, Krishna, with his transcendental glance alone, brought all the boys and calves back to consciousness and came with them out of the mouth of the demon. While Krishna was within the mouth of Akasura, the demon's spirit soul came out like a dazzling light, illuminating all directions, and waited in the sky. As soon as Krishna came out of the mouth of the demon with his calves and friends, that glittering, effulgent light immediately merged into the body of Krishna within the vision of all the demigods. The demigods became overwhelmed with joy and showered flowers on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and thus they worshipped him. The denizens of heaven danced in jubilation, and the denizens in Gandharvaloka offered various kinds of prayers. Drummers beat drums in jubilation, the Brahmanas recited Vedic hymns, and all the devotees of the Lord chanted the words, "Jai, Jai!" All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jai. When Lord Brahma heard those auspicious vibrations which sounded throughout the higher planetary systems, he immediately came down to see what had happened. He saw that the demon was killed, and he was struck with wonder at the uncommon, glorious pastimes of the Personality of Godhead. The gigantic mouth of the demon remained in open position for many days and gradually dried up. It remained a spot of pleasure pastimes for all the cowherd boys. The killing of Akasura took place when Krishna and all his boyfriends were under 5 years old. Children under 5 years old are called Kaumara. From 5 years up to the 10th year, they're called Pauganda. And from the 10th year up to the 15th year, they're called Kaishora. After the 15th year, boys are called youths. For 1 year, there was no discussion of the incident of the Ahasura demon in the village of Vraja. But when the boys attained their 6th year, they informed their parents of the incident with great wonder. For Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is far greater than such demigods as Lord Brahma, it is not at all difficult to award one the opportunity of merging with his eternal body. This he awarded to Akasura. Akasura was certainly the most sinful living entity, and it is not possible for the sinful to merge into the existence of the Absolute Truth. But in this particular case, because Krishna entered into Akasura's body, the demon became fully cleansed of all sinful reactions. Persons constantly thinking of the eternal form of the Lord in the shape of the deity or in the shape of a mental form are awarded the transcendental benediction of entering into the kingdom of God and associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can just imagine the elevated position of someone like Akasura, into whose body the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, personally entered. Great sages, meditators, and devotees constantly keep the form of the Lord within their hearts, or they see the deity form of the Lord in the temples. In that way, they become liberated from all material contamination, and at the end of the body, enter into the kingdom of God. This perfection is possible simply by keeping the form of the Lord within the mind. But in the case of Aghasura, the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally entered. Aghasura's position was therefore greater than the ordinary devotees or the greatest yogis. Maharaj Parikshit, who was engaged in hearing the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, who saved the life of Maharaj Parikshit while he was in the womb of his mother, became more and more interested to hear about him. And thus he questioned the sage Shukadeva Goswami, who was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam before the king. King Parikshit was a bit astonished to understand that the killing of the Akasura demon was not discussed for 1 year until after the boys attained the Pauganda age. Maharaj Parikshit was very inquisitive to learn about this, for he was sure that such an incident was due to the workings of Krishna's different energies. Generally, the Kshatriyas, or the administrative class, are always busy with their political affairs, and they have very little chance to hear about the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna. But while Parikshit Maharaj was hearing these transcendental pastimes, he considered himself to be very fortunate, because not only was he hearing Krishna's pastimes, but he was doing so from Shukadeva Goswami, the greatest authority on Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus, being requested by Maharaj Parikshit, Shukadeva Goswami continued to speak about the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna in the matter of his form, qualities, fame, and paraphernalia. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 12th chapter of Krishna, the killing of the Akasura demon. Jai. One more demon down. Can you look up what does Akasura mean for?
Got it right here.
Yeah.
Cruelty and violence.
Cruelty and violence.
Is the anarta. The cruelty and
Krishna
violence.
smashing cruelty and violence. So if you're struggling with cruelty or violence in your heart, even subtle cruelty, enjoying seeing someone suffer. I remember one time I was a kid and I was waiting at the bus stop for my bus to go home from school. And this other boy came up and sat next to me. And we were waiting for the bus, and this bee was like walking on the ground. It was like crawling. The bee sometimes wasn't flying, it was just crawling. And he looked at it and he stepped on it deliberately. And I was like, I didn't know the kid, so I didn't say anything. But in my head, I was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that to this thing? Why would you end its life, right? And he hadn't learned that, sensitivity yet. But the world is cosmic sensitivity training. So in one life or another, we all learn to become averse to causing harm to other living entities, to become sensitive to their sufferings, to not want them to suffer, to want them to be uplifted. And if we don't have that, if we're like callousness is actually also, if it's not cruelty, it's actually like an unnatural condition to be insensitive to the suffering of others. That's a kind of cruelty, actually. It's a kind of violence. If we have that, then it's to be understood that we're covered to some extent. So I was just reminded of that. And Krishna killed Akasura, so we're already getting purified. Chapter 13. Well, let's pause. Any comments, questions, or reflections? That was pretty cool. I don't know. I like how Krishna's friends were like, you know what? Let's just walk in. He's got this. Yeah, we'll be fine.
About trust.
Yeah. So they're like laughing and clapping, and it's like going in,
Enter it waits.
off to see the serpent. Krishna's like, all right, whoa, that's pretty far out. He was astonished for a second.
And you're so little.
Yeah,
Under
it was 8 miles high.
8 miles long.
8 miles long. Okay, it's pretty high.
But his mouth was from the ground to the clouds, so probably more than 8 miles.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
And they're under 5 years of age.
But they have Krishna with them.
Yeah, when I was 5 years old,
do anything.
I wasn't fearless.
No.
But Krishna is like the awarder of complete fearlessness to the point of recklessness.
Right, like how like it's like, oh, I'm just gonna do this thing that might be bad, but like you'll get me out of it. So like
Yeah, I mean, maybe don't imitate that. Maybe don't like, you know what, Krishna? Crossing the streets for babies, I'm just gonna walk and they can deal with it.
That's why we have Amy the crossing guard.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. But in Krishna's pastimes, it's completely fearless. We see this in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes too. It's totally fearless. It's like, whatever. And it's to be aspired for, that position of actually feeling the truth that he's got me. He's just got me. This is all play. Nothing can go wrong. This is all play.
Like when Prabhupada was asked what he thinks about or what he feels when he's chanting the Maha Mantra, he said, I feel
I
fearless.
feel fearless. Yeah. Sundarananda.
Yes, Prabhu, I had a question. So I noticed that somewhere towards the start, sorry, I have a little bit of a hoarse throat. It says, Agasur was actually the brother
Mm.
of Bakasur and Putana. So I was thinking they're like three completely I mean, their forms are so different, right? One of them is a snake, one of them is like a giant stork or a crane, and then this lady, right? I mean, what are we to make of that? Is it that they had
Yeah.
all these forms,
It's, if you read the Putana demon, the Putana pastime again, she assumes the form of a woman, and Bakasura and Akasura assume these forms. They're something like Rakshasas. They're very, they're shapeshifters. They're very yogically advanced. Prabhupada mentions in this chapter too that very advanced demons have yogic powers. They performed great austerities. They can shift their bodily form. They have the ability to manipulate space and time to some degree. They're like wizards, you know? Like if anybody's into like Lord of the Rings or fantasy or, hero stories, they're basically like evil wizards. And Krishna has slain them. So
Voldemort.
yeah, there's like the serpent wizard and the woman wizard and the bird wizard, and they all have magical powers. Basically, it looks like magic, or they're like, if you're into Star Wars, or they're using the Force. Basically, they're so refined in their capacity to manipulate the material energy that they actually can manipulate space and matter to the point of changing their shape. He chose that form. It's not his eternal material form. It's just what he chose to trick Krishna and the boys to walk in, eat them. Somehow or other, they're all siblings. What we know, the backstory is that Kamsa has recruited several awful people and living entities to do his bidding because he wants to kill Krishna and he knows that Krishna was born. So he's sending all these shapeshifters and assassins and bounty hunters to just go wreak havoc in Vrindavan. And they're going like moths into a flame, and Krishna's killing and liberating every one of them. So their external form has variety, but they all have black hearts. That's all we need.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Well,
When Agasara, when he died, when he left his body, he came up as this glittering, effulgent light. And did it say then that went into Krishna's body?
yes.
Okay, so literally he went home to Krishna.
Yeah, visibly.
Visibly.
Visibly, he demonstrated that he's a part and parcel of Krishna and that he belongs to Krishna.
That's the first time that happened in the pastimes.
Yeah, that's the first time that we actually haven't notice of that.
That was different.
It is kind of cool.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we'll continue with chapter 13.
I just wanted to say that I loved the one line that says that Krishna is the assurance of safety to everyone.
Yeah.
And that's just like really, really, really important. And it's just so simple. Some of these like one-liners are so simple, right? Where we can like spend hours and hours and hours really embracing that, but it's so deep yet so simple. And it's just really beautiful. And then the other piece about where they were talking about like the position that Agasura was in because Krishna entered his body, right? And so as devotees, where they speak about as devotees, we can allow Krishna to enter our hearts and what that does for us. We can pray for that. We can keep that in our meditation. We can hope for that. We can, really strive for that, and how that's like ultimately the opportunity for liberation long term, years, many lifetimes from now. But like we can have him in our hearts. We can allow him to enter our own personal being as well. And I thought that was really, really potent as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and the idea of Krishna as the protector and a warder of fearlessness. Surrender, we've heard about this many times, and we'll continue to hear it. Surrender is defined as having 6 angas: to accept what's favorable for Krishna's service, to reject what's unfavorable for his service, to accept the Lord as one's maintainer, to accept the Lord as one's protector and only protector, full humility and complete dedication of the self.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah. So that fearlessness, that's actually like a very core function of surrender, is like actually to believe that he's my protector and my only protector. No one else can protect me. Everyone else who's doing some service of protection is like empowered by him, including the crossing guards.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah, we need him. Okay, chapter 13. The stealing of the boys and calves by Brahma. Ooh, spicy. Shukadeva Goswami was very much encouraged. Maharaj Parikshit asked him why the cowherd boys did not discuss the death of Akasura until after 1 year had passed. It is said that it is the nature of a devotee to constantly apply his mind, energy, words, ears, etc. in hearing and chanting about Krishna. This is called Krishna consciousness. And for one who is wrapped in hearing and chanting about Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old. That is the significance of transcendental subject matter in contrast to material subject matter. One can go on chanting and hearing about the Lord and never feel tired, but remain fresh and eager to hear more and more. It is a duty of the spiritual master to disclose all confidential subject matter to the inquisitive and sincere disciple. Thus, Shukadeva Goswami began to explain why the killing of Akasura was not discussed until 1 year had passed. After saving his friends from the mouth of Akasura and killing the demon, Lord Krishna brought his friends to the bank of the Yamuna and addressed them as follows. My dear friends, just see how this spot is very nice for taking lunch and playing on the soft sandy Yamuna bank. You can see how the lotus flowers in the water are beautifully blown and how they distribute their fragrance all around. And this just enriches the beautiful scenery created by the trees here. Let us have our lunch in this spot because it is already late and we are feeling hungry. Let the calves remain near us and let them drink water from the Yamuna. While we engage in our lunch taking, the calves may engage in eating the soft grasses that are in this spot. On hearing this proposal from Krishna, all the boys became very glad and said, certainly, let us all sit down here to take our lunch. They then let loose the calves to eat the soft grass. Sitting down on the ground and keeping Krishna in the center, they began to open their lunch boxes brought from home. Lord Sri Krishna was seated in the center of the circle and all the boys kept their faces toward him. They ate and constantly enjoyed seeing the Lord face to face. Krishna appeared to be the whorl of a lotus flower and the boys surrounding him appeared to be its different petals. The boys collected flowers, leaves of flowers, and the bark of trees and placed their lunch on them as well as in their lunch boxes, and thus they began to eat their lunch, keeping company with Krishna. While taking lunch, each boy began to manifest different kinds of relations with Krishna, and they enjoyed each other's company with joking words. While Lord Krishna was thus enjoying lunch with his friends, his flute was pushed within the belt of his cloth on his right side, and his bugle and cane were pushed in on the left-hand side of his cloth. In his left palm, he was holding a lump of food prepared with yogurt, butter, rice, and pieces of fruit salad, which could be seen through his petal-like finger joints. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who accepts the results of all great sacrifices, was laughing and joking, enjoying lunch with his friends in Vrindavan. And thus the scene was being observed by the demigods from heaven. As for the boys, they were simply enjoying transcendental bliss in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, the calves that were pasturing nearby entered into the deep forest, allured by new grasses, and gradually went out of sight. When the boys saw that the calves were not nearby, they became afraid for their safety and immediately cried out, "Krishna!" Krishna is the killer of fear personified. Everyone is afraid of fear personified, but fear personified is afraid of Krishna. By crying out the word Krishna, the boys at once transcended the fearful situation. Out of his great affection, Krishna did not want his friends to give up their pleasing lunch engagement and go searching for the calves. He therefore said, "My dear friends, you need not interrupt your lunch. Go on enjoying. I am going personally to find the calves." Thus, Lord Krishna, still carrying the lump of yogurt and rice preparation in his left hand, immediately started to search out the calves in the caves and bushes. He searched in the mountain holes and in the forests, but nowhere could he find them. Okay, now we're going to pause for some transcendental art. Yeah. Here is Krishna taking on the Bakasura demon from last week. Stork demon. Is there anything we missed? We got to do this regularly because here's Krishna liberating another Kubra Manigriva. And now here he is. Can you all see? Here's Krishna. You all have your books in front of you. Yeah. This is Krishna watching as his friends march into Akasa. And here he is having a picnic with all the boys. It's described, I don't know if it's going to come up or it hasn't happened yet, but when Krishna was seated in the center like that, they all felt he was facing them simultaneously. This is mystic potency. He can make that happen. He doesn't have to choose. So, he searched in the mountain holes in the forest, but nowhere could he find them. At the time when Akasura was killed and the demigods were looking on the incident with great surprise, Brahma, who was born of the lotus flower growing out of the navel of Vishnu, came also to see. He was surprised how a little boy like Krishna could act so wonderfully. Although he was informed that the little cowherd boy was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to see more of the Lord's glorious pastimes, and thus he stole all the calves and cowherd boys and took them to a different place. Lord Krishna, therefore, in spite of searching for the calves, could not find them, and he even lost his boyfriends on the bank of the Yamuna, where they had been taking their lunch. In the form of a cowherd boy, Lord Krishna was very little in comparison to Brahma, but because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he could immediately understand that all the calves and boys had been stolen by Brahma. Krishna thought, Brahma has taken away all the boys and calves. How can I alone return to Vrindavan? The mothers will be aggrieved. Therefore, in order to satisfy the mothers of his friends, as well as to convince Brahma of the supremacy of the personality of Godhead, he immediately expanded himself as the cowherd boys and calves. In the Vedas, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already expanded himself into so many living entities by his energy. Therefore, it was not very difficult for him to expand himself again into so many boys and calves. He expanded himself to become exactly like the boys, who are of all different features and facial and bodily constructions, and who are different in their clothing and ornaments and in their behavior and personal activities. In other words, although each boy, being an individual soul, has entirely different tastes, activities, and behavior, Krishna exactly expanded himself into all the different positions of the individual boys. He also became the calves, who are also of different sizes, colors, activities, etc. This was possible because everything is an expansion of Krishna's energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said, Parasya Brahmana Shaktihi. Whatever we actually see in the cosmic manifestation, be it matter or the activities of the living entities, is simply an expansion of the energies of the Lord, as heat and light are the different expansions of fire. Thus, expanding himself as the boys and calves in their individual capacities, and surrounded by such expansions of himself, Krishna entered the village of Vrindavan. The residents had no knowledge of what had happened. After entering the village of Vrindavan, all the calves entered their respective cowsheds, and the boys went to their respective mothers and homes. The mothers of the boys heard the vibration of their flutes before their entrance, and to receive them, they came out of their homes and embraced them. Out of maternal affection, milk was flowing from their breasts, and they allowed the boys to drink it. However, their offering was not exactly to their boys, but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had expanded himself into such boys. This was a chance for all the mothers of Vrindavan to feed the Supreme Personality of Godhead with their own milk. Therefore, not only did Lord Krishna give Yashoda the chance to feed him, but this time he gave the chance to all the other elderly gopis. All the boys dealt with their mothers as usual, and the mothers also, on the approach of evening, bathed their respective children, decorated them with tilaka and ornaments, and gave them necessary food after the day's labor. The cows also, who had been away in the pasturing ground, returned in the evening and called their respective calves. The calves immediately came to their mothers, and the mothers began to lick the bodies of the calves. These relations of the cows and the gopis with their calves and boys remained unchanged, although actually the original calves and boys were not there. Actually, the cows' affection for their calves and the elderly gopis' affection for their boys causelessly increased. Their affection increased naturally, even though the calves and boys were not their offspring. Although the cows and elder gopis of Vrindavan had greater affection for Krishna than for their own offspring, after this incident, their affection for their offspring increased unlimitedly, exactly as it did for Krishna. For 1 year continuously, Krishna himself expanded as the calves and cowherd boys and was present in the pasturing ground. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's expansion is situated in everyone's heart as a supersoul, but in this case, instead of expanding himself as a supersoul, he expanded himself as a portion of calves and cowherd boys for 1 continuous year. One day, a few days before a year had passed, Krishna and Balaram were maintaining their calves in the forest when they saw some cows grazing on the top of Govardhan Hill. The cows could see down into the valley where the calves were being taken care of by the boys. Suddenly, on seeing the cows began to run toward them. They leaped downhill with joined front and rear legs. The cows were so melted with affection for the calves that they did not care about the rough path from the top of Govardhan Hill down to the pasturing ground. They approached the calves with their milk bags full of milk, and they raised their tails upwards. When they were coming down the hill, their milk bags were pouring milk on the ground out of intense maternal affection for the calves, although they were not their own cows. These cows had their own calves, and the calves that were grazing beneath Govardhan Hill were larger. They were not expected to drink milk directly from the milk bag, but were satisfied with the grass. You see, the cows had had these calves a year earlier, and now they've grown up.
Yeah.
But these calves that were expanded from Krishna are directly him. And so they're especially attractive. There's a special love there. And so although they're supposed to be weaned and ready to have grass, their mothers are trying to give them milk. All the cows came immediately and began to lick their bodies, and the calves also began to suck milk from the milk bags. There appeared to be a great bond of affection between the calves and cows. When the cows were running down from the top of Govardhan Hill, the men who were taking care of them tried to stop them. Older cows are taken care of by the men, and the calves are taken care of by the boys. And as far as possible, the calves are kept separate from the cows, so that the calves do not drink all the available milk. Therefore, the men who were taking care of the cows on the top of Govardhan Hill tried to stop them, but they failed. Baffled by their failure, they were feeling ashamed and angry. They were very unhappy. But when they came down and saw their children taking care of the calves, they all of a sudden became very affectionate toward the children. It was very astonishing. Although the men came down disappointed, baffled, and angry, as soon as they saw their own children, their hearts melted with a great affection. At once their anger, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness disappeared. They began to show paternal love for the children, and with great affection they lifted them in their arms and embraced them. They began to smell their children's heads and enjoy their company with great happiness. After embracing their children, the men took the cows back to the top of Govardhan Hill. Along the way, they began to think of their children, and affectionate tears fell from their eyes. When Balaram saw this extraordinary exchange of affection between the cows and the calves, and between the fathers and their children, when neither the calves nor the children needed so much care, he began to wonder why this extraordinary thing had happened. He was astonished to see all the residents of Vrindavan so affectionate to their own children, exactly as they had been to Krishna. Similarly, the cows had grown affectionate to the calves as much as to Krishna. Balaram therefore concluded that the extraordinary show of affection was something mystical, either performed by the demigods or by some powerful man. He concluded that this mystical change must have been caused by Krishna, whom Balaram considered his worshipable personality of Godhead. He thought it was arranged by Krishna, and even I could not check its mystic power. Thus Balaram understood that all those boys and calves, were only expansions of Krishna. Balaram inquired from Krishna about the actual situation. He said, "My dear Krishna, in the beginning I thought that all these calves and cowherd boys were either great sages and saintly persons or demigods, but at present it appears they are actually your expansions. They are all you. You yourself are playing as the calves and boys. What is the mystery of this situation? Where have those other calves and boys gone? And why are you expanding yourself as the calves and boys? Will you kindly tell me what is the cause?" At the request of Balaram, Krishna briefly explained the whole situation, how the calves and boys had been stolen by Brahma, and how Krishna was concealing the incident by expanding himself so people would not know that the original calves and boys were missing. While Krishna and Balaram were talking, Brahma returned after a moment's interval, according to the duration of his life. We have information of Lord Brahma's duration of life from Bhagavad Gita. 1,000 times the duration of the 4 ages, or 1,000 times 4.32 million years, constitute Brahma's 12 hours. Similarly, 1 moment of Brahma's time is equal to 1 year of our solar calculation. After 1 moment of Brahma's calculation, Brahma came back to see the fun caused by his stealing the boys and calves, but he was also afraid that he was playing with fire. Krishna was his master, and he had played mischief for fun by taking away his calves and boys. He was really anxious, so he did not stay away very long. He came back after a moment by his calculation. He saw that all the boys and calves were playing with Krishna in the same way as when he had come upon them, although he was confident that he had taken them and made them lie down asleep under the spell of his mystic power. Brahma began to think, all the boys and calves were taken away by me, and I know they are still sleeping. How is it that a similar batch of boys and calves is playing with Krishna? Is it that they are not influenced by my mystic power? Have they been playing continually for 1 year with Krishna? Brahma tried to understand who they were and how they were uninfluenced by his mystic power, but he could not ascertain it. In other words, he himself came under the spell of his own mystic power. The influence of his mystic power appeared like snow in darkness, or a glowworm in the daytime. During the night's darkness, the glowworm can show some glittering power, and the snow piled up on the top of a hill or on the ground can shine during the daytime. But at night, the snow has no silver glitter, nor does the glowworm have any illuminating power during the daytime. Similarly, when the small mystic power exhibited by Brahma was before the mystic power of Krishna, it was just like snow at night or a glowworm during the day. When a man of small mystic power wants to show potency in the presence of greater mystic power, he diminishes his own influence, he does not increase it. Even such a great personality as Brahma, when he wanted to show his mystic power before Krishna, became ludicrous. Brahma was thus confused about his own mystic power. In order to convince Brahma that all those calves and boys were not the original ones, the calves and boys who were playing with Krishna transformed into Vishnu forms. Actually, the original ones were sleeping under the spell of Brahma's mystic power, but the present ones, seen by Brahma, were all immediate expansions of Krishna, or Vishnu. Vishnu is the expansion of Krishna, so the Vishnu forms appeared before Brahma. All the Vishnu forms were of bluish color and dressed in yellow garments. All of them had 4 hands decorated with club, disc, lotus flower, and conch shell. On their heads were glittering golden helmets inlaid with jewels. They were bedecked with pearls and earrings and garlanded with beautiful flowers. On their chests was the mark of Shrivatsa. Their arms were decorated with armlets and other jewelry, and their necks were just like conch shells. Their legs were decorated with bells, their waists with golden belts, and their fingers with jeweled rings. Brahma also saw that upon the whole body of Lord Vishnu, from the lotus feet up to the top of the head, fresh tulsi leaves and buds had been thrown. Another significant feature of the Vishnu forms was that all of them were looking transcendently beautiful. Their smiling resembled the moonshine, and their glancing resembled the early rising of the sun. Just by their glancing, they showed themselves to be the creators and maintainers of the modes of ignorance and passion. After this manifestation of Lord Vishnu, Brahma saw that many other Brahmas and Shivas and demigods and even insignificant living entities down to the ants and very small straws, all moving and non-moving living entities, were dancing, surrounding Lord Vishnu. Their dancing was accompanied by various kinds of music, and all of them were worshipping Lord Vishnu. Brahma realized that all those Vishnu forms were complete in mystic power, from the anima perfection of becoming small like an atom up to becoming infinite like the cosmic manifestation. All the mystic powers of Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods, and the 24 elements of cosmic manifestation were fully represented in the person of Vishnu. By the influence of Lord Vishnu, all subordinate mystic powers were engaged in his worship. He was being worshipped by time, space, the cosmic manifestation, reformation, desire, activity, and the three qualities of material nature. Lord Vishnu, Brahma, also realized, is the reservoir of all truth, knowledge, and bliss. He is the combination of three transcendental features, namely eternity, knowledge, and bliss, and he is the object of worship by the followers of the Upanishads. Brahma realized that all the different forms of boys and calves transformed into Vishnu forms were not transformed by mysticism of the type that a yogi or a demigod can display by specific powers invested in him. The calves and boys transformed into Vishnu Murtis or Vishnu forms were not displays of Vishnu Maya or Vishnu's energy, but were Vishnu himself. The respective qualifications of Vishnu and Vishnu Maya are just like fire and heat. In the heat, there is the qualification of fire, namely warmth, and yet heat is not fire. The manifestation of the Vishnu forms of the boys and calves was not like the heat, but it was rather the fire. They were all actually Vishnu. Factually, the qualification of Vishnu is full truth, full knowledge, and full bliss. Another example can be given with material objects which are reflected in many, many forms. For example, the sun is reflected in many water pots, but the reflections of the sun in the many pots are not actually the sun. There is no actual heat or light from the suns in the pots, although they appear like the suns. But the forms which Krishna assumed were each and every one full Vishnu. The specific word used in this connection is Satya Jnanananda. Satya Jnanananda. Satya means truth, Jnana, full knowledge, Ananta, unlimited, and Ananda, full bliss. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are so great that the impersonalistic followers of the Upanishads cannot reach the platform of knowledge to understand them. Especially the transcendental forms of the Lord are beyond the reach of the impersonalists, who can only understand through studying the Upanishads that the absolute truth is not matter, or is not materially restricted. From Krishna's expansion into Vishnu forms, Lord Brahma could understand by his limited potency that everything movable and immovable within the cosmic manifestation is existing due to the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Lord. When Brahma was thus standing baffled in his limited power and conscious of his limited activities within the 11 senses, he could realize that he was also a creation of the material energy, just like a puppet. As a puppet has no independent power to dance, but dances according to the direction of the puppet master, so the demigods and living entities are all subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As is stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the only master is Krishna and all others are his servants. The whole world is under the waves of the material spell, and beings are floating like straws in water. So their struggle for existence is continuing. But as soon as one becomes conscious that he is the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this Maya, or illusory struggle for existence, is immediately stopped. Lord Brahma, who has full control over the goddess of learning and who is considered to be the best authority in Vedic knowledge, was thus perplexed, being unable to understand the extraordinary power manifested by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not only did Brahma fail to understand, but he was perplexed even to see the display which was being manifested by Krishna before him. Krishna took compassion upon Brahma because of his inability to see how Krishna was displaying the forms of Vishnu and transforming himself into calves and coward boys. And thus, while fully manifesting the Vishnu expansions, he suddenly pulled his curtain of Yogamaya over the scene. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not visible due to the curtain spread by Yogamaya. That which covers the reality is Mahamaya, or the external energy, which does not allow a conditioned soul to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead beyond the cosmic manifestation. But the energy which partially manifests the Supreme Personality of Godhead and partially does not allow one to see is called Yogamaya. Brahma is not an ordinary conditioned soul. He is far, far superior to all the other demigods, and yet he could not comprehend the display of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Krishna willingly stopped manifesting any further potency. The conditioned soul not only becomes bewildered, but is completely unable to understand. The curtain of Yogamaya was drawn so that Brahma would not become more and more perplexed. When Brahma was relieved from his perplexity, he appeared to awaken from an almost dead state, and he began to open his eyes with great difficulty. Thus he could see the external cosmic manifestation with common eyes. He saw all around him the super excellent view of Vrindavan, full with trees, which is the source of life for all living entities. He could appreciate the transcendental land of Vrindavan, where all the living entities are transcendental to ordinary nature. In the forest of Vrindavan, even ferocious animals like tigers live peacefully along with the deer and human beings. He could understand that because of the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vrindavan is transcendental to all other places and is free of lust and greed. Brahma thus found Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, playing the part of a small cowherd boy. He saw that little child with a lump of food in his left hand, searching out his friends and calves, just as he had actually been doing 1 year before, after their disappearance. Immediately, Brahma descended from his great swan carrier and fell down before the Lord just like a golden stick. The word used among the Vaishnavas for offering respect is dandavat. This word means falling down like a stick. One should offer respect to the superior Vaishnava by falling down straight, with his body just like a stick. So Brahma fell down before the Lord just like a stick to offer his respect. And because the complexion of Brahma is golden, he appeared to be like a golden stick lying down before Lord Krishna. All the 4 helmets on the heads of Brahma touched the lotus feet of Krishna. Brahma, being very joyful, began to shed tears, and he washed the lotus feet of Krishna with his tears. Repeatedly he fell and rose as he recalled the wonderful activities of the Lord. After repeating obeisances for a long time, Brahma stood up and smeared his hands over his eyes. Seeing the Lord before him, he trembling began to offer prayers with great respect, humility, and attention. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 13th chapter of Krishna, the stealing of the boys and calves by Brahma. Wow. The most intelligent living being in the entire universe just had his mind blown. What? He's completely astonished and humbled. He's been completely humbled. Whatever pride was there in his heart was removed. This is a very, very important pastime. It's called the Brahma Vimohana Lila, the bewilderment of Brahma. And it's a very powerful path. You can actually read about it, what it represents.
Mundane activities and speculative scholasticism. Scholasticism.
Yeah, the covering of the heart by the accomplishment of activities or mundane intelligence. Brahma is the most accomplished. He's a living entity like us. Like, he's not God. He's not even Lord Shiva. He's actually just the most advanced living entity. But he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know who he was playing with when he stole the calves and cows. And when he came back after a moment thinking, wait a minute, something's not right here. It was a year of Earth time.
Yeah.
And apparently nothing had changed. And he's like, what? And then Krishna manifested that all those boys and calves were actually Vishnu. They weren't the energy of Vishnu. They were God himself. Krishna expanded as God in the part of all those persons. And Brahma's like, what? His mind and intelligence became like covered to the point of like dullness. He said, Prabhupada said he's like a dead body. He's so shocked and amazed. He couldn't even process what was happening. And then Krishna removed the covering. So Brahma came practically back to life, and he was able to see what was going on, what he missed, that I was trying to play with Krishna. This is actually the Supreme Person. It's interesting because one of the details is that, Krishna, he's got the food in his left hand. In traditional Vedic culture, you don't eat with your left hand. The left hand is for unclean activities, like going to the bathroom. You eat with your right hand. So this little boy is like not only a little boy, he's like not even properly educated, apparently. And Brahma's, one of his names is Viti, which means regulation or rule, because Brahma is like the most expert understander of the Vedas. And he's like, this can't be God. This is a little boy. He's not even together enough to not eat with his left hand. Twice now we heard he has a morsel of yogurt, fruit, butter, and rice. And in the Bhagavatam is described, he's been holding it for so long, it's starting to leak between his fingers. He's like this little boy with the food in his left hand, looking at Brahma, and Brahma's like, oh my God, it's you. So it's quite the moment. It's really quite the moment.
Mm.
And as a note, when Srila Prabhupada resumed his translation of the Bhagavatam, that's the chapter he got to. He finished the translation of that chapter for us in the verse by verse translation of Bhagavatam. He did not get to the 14th chapter. So just a little detail.
Which canto?
10.
Oh, 10.
10. Yeah.
Mhm.
10, 13.
Oh.
It's really beautiful. In fact, his purports to that section are, I would say, especially touching, knowing what he's going through. He was very ill, in a lot of pain. But when we have like the recordings of him whispering the purports into the microphone so they could record it, they're very powerful purports. They're actually amazing. You should check them out. So any thoughts, questions, or reflections? I don't think we're going to get to this 14th chapter yet. A sneak preview. The 14th chapter is Brahma's prayers being elicited by that humility of realizing exactly who he's dealing with and what he tried to do and his own smallness and Krishna's greatness. So they're like some of the all-time prayers. We'll hear them next week.
Mm.
But let's take some questions, comments, or reflections. Reflections means anything you heard that stuck out.
I love how in the beginning of this chapter, it's described how the boys all sit down in the grass and specifically says in keeping Krishna at the center,
Yeah,
right? And
like
they all,
flower.
yeah. And then how they get to enjoy they all get to enjoy his gaze, as you were referring to in the picture too. But
Yeah,
just that beautiful reminder of keeping Krishna at the center.
keeping literally in the center, and also
Literally.
the unlimited capacity. I had one senior devotee, Dimamrita Swami. He pointed out, anyone in the world, if you stare at them for long enough, at some point they're like, "What's the deal? What are you looking at?" Krishna, you can stare at him all day. You can go to the deity form. You can just like all day and all night, and he'll soak up all that love and attention. He can actually take that. Nobody else can actually receive that. Nobody else can be God. Nobody can actually receive all that unlimited love we have to give. Only Krishna. So that's why he's in the middle. Because he can actually take all the love from all those boys, individually face each one simultaneously, and perfectly reciprocate with all of them. Just like he's in the heart of every living entity. And as soon as, all the time, and as soon as you want to turn to him, he's like, I'm here for you. You want me? I'm yours. Just immediately. Perfect reciprocation. Like no lapse of time, no lapse of expertise. So it's a beautiful scene. And I think there might be a piece of art to that effect. If you look, we'll broadcast it for our viewers at home.
Isn't it the one you already showed?
No, it's.
There's another one.
It's in the back section of the pictures after the serpent.
Any more reflections or comments or questions?
We have to remember to look at him.
Yeah, we're having so much fun reading. I forget
No, I
sometimes.
mean, we have to remember to look at Krishna because he's waiting there for us to look at him. Yes, what do you?
Here.
This is the picture I thought.
Right, this
Just
is.
give it to me,
You
I'll
already,
find it.
we already did this. You already showed it.
And did that?
Yeah.
It's not another one? Okay,
No, the
Anyway.
next one is Brahma's prayers.
fair enough.
Yeah.
More comments, questions, reflections?
Andy, what do you think?
Thanks, Krishna.
Just the fearlessness that the boys have when Krishna's present with them. As a parent, that's who I want my boys hanging with all the time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you. Stacy says, is that why everyone prays like a stick, men only? Is that, you mean like
Don't know.
bowing down?
When you go to the temple, like the women don't, but all of you, the men come down like a stick. And
Yeah.
then,
It's the idea is that getting flat on the ground is like as low as you can get. In the early days of ISKCON, the women did too. Culturally, women don't, because there's a little detail in Shastra that the breasts of the women are like representative of motherhood, and Krishna is he's so respectful toward mothers. He doesn't want them to actually humble themselves like that, to be on the ground. So like out of respect for that consideration, women will usually do the chaturanga, knees, elbows, hands, and forehead, or panchanga, five limbs, knees, elbows, hands, head. But the Dandavat is what Prabhupada's talking about. Like Brahma, just like flat like a rod. So yeah, that's where it comes from. It's the etiquette. Mel, sometimes I feel like the more I learn or realize or try to understand, the more I cannot grasp the depths of the greatness of our divine beloved. What a phenomenon. I mean, you're in good company because Brahma is the most intelligent person in the entire universe. He is the first hearer of the Vedas. He is the most expert knower of Shastra and regulation. He is the longest living entity. And he just had his entire self-conception, grasp of reality, universal knowledge, just like broken into a billion pieces. So his prayers are going to come from that place. I'm trying to find a particular piece of art that I know exists from this pastime that's not in the Krishna book. If I can find it, I'll share the screen. In the meantime, yeah, this one. This is the one. One sec. Share screen. There, can you see that?
Yes.
That's, you see how there's Krishna there in the middle with little picnic baskets. And around him on his level are these little boys, but above them are the boys expanded into the forms of Vishnu. All of them are directly God. And Krishna's like, ta-da! Pretty cool. I like this piece of art. It's really beautiful. I like the details on Krishna's form here.
You can see, like, if you look, you can see the little boys, like, kind of underneath.
Yeah, eating and joking and sharing food, and then you can see that they're actually Vishnu. Yeah. Yeah, so hold on to that feeling of humility, and the more you know you don't know, because that's going to be, and you can read ahead. I won't. Who can stop you? It's a good idea. This 14th chapter coming up is really, if you can read it in that mode, it's really powerful. And for bonus points, if you ever want to go deeper into something that we're reading, you can always refer to that in the Bhagavatam. Like you can go to the Veda base, like Canto 10, Chapter 14, and read these prayers. There's some really famous verses coming up, really famous ones. Prabhupada's going to summarize them in prose. But if you want to get into any of them, you can check out the Sanskrit, check out what the Acharyas have said, because all those purports, our commentators who picked up after Srila Prabhupada, his disciples, Hridayananda Das Goswami and Gopi Pradhananda Prabhu, filled out those purports primarily by quoting from Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, all the previous acharyas. So they're giving like a lot of depth to what these prayers really mean. It's I think one year we just studied these prayers every day at Govardhan. They're like an all-time classic, like top 10 section of Bhagavatam in a lot of devotees' opinions.
Where did you say that and if I get the Bhagavatam,
You know what? I'll pull it up for you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other reflections or comments or questions?
Circling
Yes.
back just when we were talking about mercy and just not only him replacing the boys and the calves so that they wouldn't be lost to the village and their family, but just at the end of the paragraph that it says, he also gave the elder gopis the chance to feed him.
Yeah.
So like it was, mercy, not just from Mother Yashoda, but everybody could have the privilege of feeding him as well.
For a whole year. Yeah, they had the cows got him and the moms got him. Special mercy. So I put it in the chat if you want to look at the upcoming prayers from Brahma in the Bhagavatam. And of course you can read it in the Krishna book too, chapter 14. You'll get two different angles on the same pastime. All right. Anything else? All right, we only got to 2 chapters, but they were deep ones, and I think special. So We'll see you next week. Please read, if you didn't already, chapters 12 and 13. And then you can read ahead 14 if you want, 15. And comment in the WhatsApp about whatever stood out. There's so much nectar there, so much detail. You can even comment on the art, you know, that's also really totally valid. Like if you have a piece of art that's really touching your heart, like I really like this, just mention it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Krishna Govinda, the bewilderer of Brahma ki jai.
Yeah.
Vanchakapatrubhyascha kripasindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Tikoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank
Hari Hari
you.
Bol.
Have a great week.
All right, Bol Sweet Souls, Shannon, Samantha, Julia, Sundar, Aaron, Stacy, Mel.
Happy Gaur Purnima.
Hare Krishna.